Hello, 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 friends. Happy Monday. Guess what? We are into October now, which I love. October is great. It's full on fall. And also, it means the start of Halloween, so we can count down all of our days to the actual celebration. But more importantly, it just reminds us that we always need to have something that we're looking forward to. Whether there's a meeting or a friend hangout or petting our pets, dog, cat, lizard, bird, whatever have you, right? It's good to have things that we're looking forward to be future oriented as we live now in the present. And as we're here on Pink Pixels every single Monday, I love that we get to approach that mindset. We're here engaging in the conversations, being present with one another. But we're listening to all of this and thinking, how does this get to be involved or change the way that I'm going to be gaming, the things that I am going to do? And it gives us something to look forward to, right? A new approach, new perspective, a new game to play, new people to connect with, right? That's the beauty of all of it. Pink Pixels is a space here where we have a conversation and we recognize pathways forward instead of stop signs, dead ends, right? Where we feel just stuck. We together create this community that feels inspiring and encourages us to keep moving forward and to be the true gamers that we are in all of our ways, and recognizing that there's no just one set path of what a gamer looks like or what does it look like to be in the game business area. There's so much to be a part of here in this space. And every week, every single freaking week, I swear by this, all right, we have some of the most talented and amazing guests come on our show, and I learn something new every single time. I come here and I think, wow, why didn't I ever think of that? Gosh, I feel so impressed and amazed. I love it. And I know this week is going to be no different. We have the amazing Renee joining us tonight from Stumbling Cat Studios, which, by the way, is absolutely adorable. And we might also get a surprise cat visit, or at least a cat tail flying in and out. So I already can guarantee you all are going to love Renee, absolutely. But enough of me talking. Let's just get right down to the joy of it all, the star of the show. If you would all be absolutely amazingly kind, help me welcome Renee. Say hello to them.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can confirm the cat's on my lap right now, so he will undoubtedly make an appearance.
I love that. I love that. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What you do, what you like, all of that in the gaming space.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Renee Gittins. I'm currently the CEO and creative director of Stumbling Cat, which is actually my own indie studio that I founded based in Seattle, but we have contributors from all over the world. And I actually started this studio 9 years ago and have had quite the game industry career since then. Most recently, I was the general manager of Phoenix Labs Vancouver that just published or released Fae Farm. And prior to that, I was the executive director of the International Game Developers Association, where my main job was helping the success of other game developers from all around the globe. So, super excited to be here and super excited to talk about our upcoming game, Potions: A Curious Tale.
I love that. You have such a record of skill, of talent just within this space. But I want to know, of all the challenges to pick on, starting your own studio is, I mean, to use the word behind you, daunting, right?
Daunting for sure.
Mhm.
Um, actually, so the interesting reason behind Stumbling Cat and behind Potions: A Curious Tale is because I didn't know I wanted to be a game developer, which meant that I actually got my engineering degree with a focus in mechanical engineering, and went into biotech. So I was in the biotech industry for a couple of years. I taught myself
Sure.
programming when I realized I wanted to be a game developer, but not a lot of game studios hire people out of biotech.
It's
So I was
not a
trying
natural or
to
common transition, is
right,
it?
right. And so when I was having trouble getting hired, I decided to at least start making some small games for my portfolio. And I made my first small game that has now lasted for 9 years of development and is finally wrapping up, and that's Potions. But starting that journey really did succeed and gave me a lot of different career opportunities throughout the last 9 years. So I've been able to really expand my skill set. I've been able to contribute back to the game development community that supported me so much. And now I'm hoping to contribute to all of games with contributing my own title.
I love that. I love that. Like as you reach peaks that you're always looking back and saying, how do I pull others up with me? And honestly,
Absolutely.
I knew there's a reason we had you on here. No, you're an amazing individual who continues to do that. I want to talk about those challenges, right? Like as you mentioned, like when people are like, oh, this is from a different degree, right? Like that's not the common pathway. What was it like starting to have to tell that story, whether it was to those in the game industry or even friends and family, be like, yeah, I'm making this career move, because that's a little intimidating, and it can also seem a little confusing to people who don't understand your passion for gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. I love my mother and she's extremely supportive,
Of
but for
course.
a few years she was asking me when I was going to get a real job.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, I started out very, very indie.
Mhm.
I managed to kickstart Potions of Curious Tale, which gave me some level of credibility. But for the most part, I did find the indie side of the game industry extremely welcoming.
Mhm.
I did run into some challenges when people made assumptions about me. I wouldn't say that anyone I wouldn't say I had encountered any like overt sexism,
Mhm.
but there was a lot of weird events where people were clearly not taking me seriously or not considering that I was even a game developer. So if I was ever at a game industry networking event and I was standing next to a man who was near my age, I would be assumed to be there as a girlfriend and not there as another game developer. And so occasionally people would go give introductions to everybody else in this group standing around except
Oh,
me because they assumed I wasn't part of the game development industry. Thankfully, I'm very stubborn and slightly aggressive. So I
you're
would
here.
always just like insert myself and be like, I'm Renee. I'm, working on my game and or I'm doing this.
Mhm.
And uh, the
Bless.
other thing that happened occasionally was I would introduce my studio and what I was working on, and I
Mhm.
would describe the people I had working on the team. I am not good at art and audio, so I would explain how I had people doing those aspects, and then I would say, and I do everything else. And people would say, well, then who does the programming? Like, well, that's part of everything else. I'm doing that
That's, yeah,
too.
that
Yes.
catches it all.
Uh, um, so it's minor, but it really grates on you over the time.
Mhm.
Thankfully, over the years, it's become much, much less regular, and
Mhm.
it's hard for me to tell if it's because the game industry has gotten better or because I've been around long enough that people kind of know who I am when I'm
Mhm.
coming to industry events.
Sure.
But hopefully the next generation of game developers has to deal with a little less questioning of their skills and a little accept a more greater acceptance that
Yes.
they're meant to be there.
But I think you're right to note that there are multiple variables that may come into play as to where you are now, right? Like you're accomplished, you've done many different points, you've connected with a lot of people. I mean, Potions is exciting, and I mean, it was a very successful Kickstarter, of course, as well on top of it. And of course, yeah, we've been seeing a lot more discussions and advanced conversations about women in the gaming space, but it also frustrates me of what you went through, because sometimes in such a small omission like that, it makes it harder to address, because then it's like, am I seeing this? Is this just me? Is there something else? But when it happens enough, like more than once, honestly, when it happens more than once to you, you're like, this doesn't feel like an accident. Like it feels like there's some sort of root there that we're trying to dig up at this point. And you might be the only one kind of seeing that root, and everybody else is just moving on and walking over with no issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is it something that you have to experience, it can put you in a really awkward position, right? Like I said, like I
Mm,
had to assert
yeah.
myself very awkwardly aggressively to
Yeah.
sometimes like break into those conversations after
Mhm.
I had been initially excluded. And that is is an awkward foot to start conversations on. Thankfully, for the most part, it's gone smoothly, be able to laugh it off. But
Mhm.
I can see that, just being an additional hurdle to overcome that shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yes. Yes. Well, and when I think about those interactions, because networking is hard enough as is, right? Like, no one's like, I love networking. I am the best at it. Like, I've not met that person who's just feels 10 out of 10 every single time they go to a networking space. But it's also in those moments, especially as women, when we think we have to assert ourselves, you always take a chance, one, how people respond to assertiveness. Some are more open to it than others. And also, because you're using that assertiveness, there's some social capital you almost have to spend at the same time, right? Where instead there's others like the default of, yes, of course you belong here. And then they get to spend their social coin that they have to say, listen to me talk about this, or
Yep.
take my invitation to join me on this thing, or to follow up with an email. And instead, now we have to use a little bit more of our social coin to say, hey, actually, let me at least introduce myself. And that takes away from that same sort of footing that we would like to
Exactly.
have.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Put you on a bit of a back foot for that start.
So I love that you're in these spaces now, and I mean, one, as somebody who is an example, right, in this space, which also feels kind of perhaps a different kind of take to hear yourself being described as an example. Like, this is the type of person we want to be in this space. This is somebody I want to look up for. You are a model for many women in the game business degree programs that I see in a lot of colleges to say, who do I need to look up to? Who's kind of a trailblazer in this path? You are a trailblazer. So when you look at that kind of pathway, do you see yourself in that same light of saying, like, I have carved out some trails that make it easier for others in this space?
Uh, I think like many people in the games industry, I certainly suffer a lot from imposter syndrome. So I can give you all the reasons why I'm not really doing that much. I try, but there's so many ways I could have potentially been more effective. But I think one encounter stands out to me. Receiving compliments from people in the industry. I don't know. I always like, it's fine. I'm just contributing like
So
anyone
humble.
else.
Push it aside. Take it.
Um,
Take it. They're giving it
yeah,
to you
yeah,
for
yeah.
a reason. Come on.
But I was actually demoing potions at an event that's coming up this next week, called Geek Girl Con. And it was actually the first video game to be shown at Geek Girl Con. And when I was demoing it there,
Mhm.
my booth was just getting absolutely mobbed, by young girls.
Oh,
And
wow.
um, a parent of one of the girls came up to me, and she was just enamored with the game and the main character Luna. And
Mhm.
the parents said to me, "Hey, thank you so much for making this game. Our daughter's in second grade, and she's getting bullied for liking Minecraft because people are saying that video games are for boys. And to have you here as a game developer
Mhm.
and showing a game that features a young girl,
Mhm.
it means so much to her." And like the fact that you are here and that you exist really gives her a feeling of validation for liking video games herself. And I have a hard time not crying
Yeah,
every
I
time I
was
think
like,
about that
that's so
story.
sweet.
um yeah, it's one thing to receive
Mhm.
compliments from peers and stuff, but like the pure innocence of a child just
Yeah.
being like, this, like she was pointing at the main character being like, that's me. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it's you. This is absolutely so that you can feel confident playing video games. And that has always been, since that moment, that's always been a motivation
Mhm.
for continuing the project and
Yeah.
to make it as wonderful as possible so that she and other girls and women and everyone else can enjoy the game and its story and feel inspired so they can follow their dreams.
I think that's beautiful. That is a very touching story and such a connecting point that I think a lot of us in who play games experience that first time when you play a character and you're like, that's me. And it feels somewhat actually connected to you instead of playing like a white-haired, strong buff male, right? Like I'm not Gerald from The Witcher at any point in time, like I'm
And here I thought you were talking about Dante.
Oh, yeah. You know,
Old.
the turns out that's way more common than I realized now. Generic white-haired male, right? Now there's also from Dragon Age too. Dang it. Okay. Um,
Yep.
yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. But there's an exciting point where we look at this game and you're like, that's me. And I like that there's some games out there that, of course, give a lot more character options, right, in the character creation. But there's still plenty of games where there's a default character. And when that default character for so long in almost every single game was a white male, it was frustrating. And I love that today we start to see a little bit more variety. Not that every single game has to have content creation, character creation, right? There's joy in being able to play from the perspective and viewpoint of different types of characters behind it. But now that we get that choice and not every game is just the default white male story.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you mentioned that because unlike many of my peers, I actually grew up on first person shooters. So my like exposure to video games
That is
was
not
Wolfenstein 3D,
okay.
Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, Pokemon Yellow, and then Half-Life. And just
This is not the vibe I
honestly,
would have guessed from the,
right?
the mind behind potions.
Yeah, Potions is completely different.
I
I
love
just
that.
it turns out I actually would have enjoyed Zelda. I just never had the consoles.
Right, right.
But just seeing Gordon Freeman be a scientist, like kind of a nerd,
Yeah.
like not just guns blazing, slaying demons, like having to
Yes.
solve puzzles. That alone was so much a change of the main characters that I was exposed
Mm,
to. I immediately completely fell in love with the genre and like, yeah, Half-Life is still one of my favorite
fair.
series, because I it meant so much to me to see, like, kind of a dorky guy save the world, and it was really relatable. I loved how the story integrated, and it wasn't just about murder, there was strategy and goals, and
Sure.
running away was viable too, so
Hmm. Yes. And I think that's really the point. Like we love all of the games. Like almost like you really got quite the genre variety in that listing there. But I love that, right? Like we don't have to be stuck to one genre. And just like with our games, we're not asking for a diminishing of a particular story or a particular perspective. What we're asking for is an increase of perspectives. Keep adding more to the game. Like give us more nerds, give us more scientists, give us more women, give us more, right? Like any and everything is what we want. We just want all of it. Does that make us
absolutely,
greedy? I
exactly.
don't know.
No, no. I think that video games are the best storytelling medium because they're immersive storytelling, which allows you to really put your feet in somebody else's shoes.
Mhm.
And having diversity of those stories is so much more interesting than just having like the same character with the same traits and the same personality qualities. I don't want to always play a straight white tough guy. Like sometimes I want to, yeah,
Mhm.
play a young girl, which is like potions.
Yes. We just want to be able to do it all. That's all we're asking
Yeah,
for.
just everything.
Everything, anything and everything. Well, let's talk about potions. I'm going to switch this over so we can see this gameplay because I think potions is absolutely fascinating. And I also just love the music that we have going on in the background for it as well. Let me unmute that so our wonderful audience can see. So here we are, potions, a curious tale, which is adorable. I love this. I'm going to adjust it
Yeah,
just a tad for us so we can get a little bit more in of the game.
great.
There we go. I think we've got that there. Okay, so here we are. Tell me about potions. I mean, this has been a couple years in the running now to say, like, we're working on this, we're telling a story. Where did it all begin?
So, Potions: A Curious Tale started as a design concept when I was frustrated around video games, particularly RPGs where you're supposed to play a hero,
Hmm.
rewarding you for just being a complete murderer, slaughtering every fluffy bunny you see for
Yeah.
gold and for experience and for anything else, materials.
Yes.
And I wanted to find a way that would discourage people from just killing things needlessly
Hmm.
without completely eliminating combat, right?
Yeah.
And that was sort of the concept around why there are potions. It's because potions require ingredients to create, and therefore you have this sort of resource management element that encourages you to not just slaughter everything, because if it's not going to give you the ingredients you need, then there's not really any use to fighting it.
Yes.
There's also this strategy here where you can engage with the environment. So this boss fight, you actually don't have any offensive potions. You can't attack this kraken. But as you see, Luna here has found these weapon racks. She's too small to pick up a weapon, but still with strategy, she can figure out how to use them to encourage the monster to hurt itself. And that's really the theme here. The theme is, using your wits. Your
Mhm.
wits are your greatest weapon. You can consider these other resources around you, and even your use of potions isn't going to be straight aggressive.
Yes. Oh, I
And,
love
and this,
that. It's a creative
yeah,
approach, right? It's like there's not one solution every single time, which is hit the monster, right? There's other things you have to consider now.
exactly. You can use enemies against each other. You can use the environment against enemies. Uh, you can figure out alternative ways to interact with enemies. Like sometimes enemies only drop ingredients if you charm them or trick them or scare them or get them wet. Like dart frogs will only drop dart frog poison if you get them wet. They're immune to water, but they'll drop their poison because they're coated in it. And there's all sorts of like strategic ways to think about your approach to the world
Mm-hmm.
that isn't just run around and slaughter everything.
Yes. Well, and not only like do you provide those solutions, you're rewarding it, which I think is so important because there are games out there like, yeah, you can choose to avoid them, but then you lose out on the XP, the gold, the whatever items that they may drop by choosing not to hurt them in that particular way. So like the idea is like if you charm them, you get this particular thing. If you learn, like it requires, I mean, to put it simply, intelligence. Like you have to learn, you
Yeah,
have to think. We're like, oh, my brain, we're gonna put this into action. But I think that's a wonderful choice in encouraging it, right? It's not just there's an option here, but it's a mechanic and there's a reward.
exactly. And a lot of times, if you do just straight up kill everything,
Mm-hmm.
it only gives you very base level ingredients that aren't necessarily as useful. So like, you are highly rewarded for thinking about things strategically and not just straight up, going forth and murdering everything you find.
Well, you get to really approach the world differently. And this kind of makes me think and go back to what you said earlier, right? Video games is this wonderful immersive form of media, right? It's a new way in which we get to see how we get to interact with the world. And I know it's virtual, but it's very informative in our approach, right? Instead of being so myopic with, I always approach things with the same sort of approach in video games, it's attacking. It's encouraging us to take a moment and recognize the unique variables of every situation. Oh my gosh, is there social learning here? I don't.
Exactly, exactly.
I love this. Now, I have to also imagine that this makes building the game a little bit more complicated, right? Like at the end of the
Oh
day,
my
we're like,
goodness,
oh, if we
yeah.
just had bad guys and their health depletes, like that's it, like done. But now you're creating, it's not necessarily enemies, but I guess encounters at this end.
Yeah, yeah. So it is really hard. Not just the enemies, so being able to like engage with them in different ways, you can kind of set that up in a manner that's a little easy to replicate.
Yeah.
But the amount of different ways to engage with enemies, the amount of different behaviors of the enemies, some aggressive, some not, and then all of the puzzles, like there's a lot of custom scripted puzzles in here, not just a generic puzzle pasted 20 times, but a singular puzzle that is unique to that situation environment that you don't have to figure out to beat the game,
Hmm.
but it still rewards you if you say like, oh, how does this happen? What's this encounter?
So, are you happy to torture yourself with saying, let's make this as complicated as possible? I mean, I love it as a
It's
gamer, but if I were like the project manager, I'd be like, fuck.
yeah. So I would say that the true downfall of the development of this game was I never intended to make it. It
Mhm.
was just a thought experiment. And because of that, I thought grandly, and now I pay for it every day. But it's something I can be proud of. I mean, I
Yes.
do think it is truly unique.
Mhm.
And you saw here, I just accidentally killed a soot spray. I didn't accidentally kill him, but I picked up a soot spray and he turned ash in my hands.
So you can't
Sometimes
touch them.
there's not quite aggressive interactions, but he became soot again.
So things are
Um,
fragile, is what we're learning.
things can be fragile, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you know, I one of the reasons the development of this game took 9 years is I decided I didn't have a true time pressure, so I wasn't going to cut any corners.
Yes.
So, everything I wanted to see exist in this game and things that I then discovered the game needed exists in here. I mean, I I did cut out some like unnecessary mechanics. There's still focus, but I wasn't cutting content.
Yes.
I was very careful to ensure that the story is very well fleshed out. The main storyline, if I were to focus on it, would take me at least 8 hours, and I know how to do everything. Uh, the demo takes me about an hour to get through, and it takes the average Twitch streamer 3.5. So there is absolutely like a ton of stuff that you can get lost in here. A lot of things that you need to figure out, and it's a very rich game. But it meant it took a very long time to create. Lots of sleepless nights.
I love that. As you've been going through, I love seeing also just the style of this, right? The worlds, these cutscenes, or like the little loading screen images that you create. Like there's a lot of different touch points throughout this. And I know you mentioned there were some things that you edited out, but it was important for you to make sure that there were certain standards still, because this is right. This is something you care about. This started off with the idea that maybe it isn't really an actual game that you were going to make, but it's in your mind. This is what an ideal game should be. And so
Yes, exactly.
you held to that. That is important. I think that's very interesting because I think in the business space, we don't often talk about values a lot. We talk like we just do it, right? And it is what it is. When you started
Yeah,
this, well, what were some things that you're like, I want to make sure that I hold to this? I mean, I guess we could use traditional, like, what was it that you valued? But what was it? Because when it comes to time, money, manpower, right? Like you have to make decisions on where you put all of those resources. What matters? That's a
yeah.
beautiful scene, by the way. That's I love that every time.
Oh, yeah, that's a map. Here, let me go back to it. You can see all the areas. So you slowly unlock this entire map and go to all these regions as you
That's
play through the
gorgeous.
game. So this actually there's 8 different biomes. You can see 6 of them here, and then there's the cave and the temples, which are kind of like dungeons, sort of ancient ruins as well that you find scattered throughout the game.
I love
So
that.
yeah, like I said, it is a content heavy game. There is a lot of stuff in here.
Yes.
Um, I think what I was trying to hold to most throughout the development and what I try not to compromise on is that concept of being a hero without having to resort to violence to solve every problem.
Mhm.
And it's certainly not the easiest way to go about creating a game, right? As you said, it's a lot easier to just be like, make enemies. Enemy health bar goes to 0, get a
Ta-da.
bonus, win the game,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So coming up, like every single boss fight can be beaten without taking any aggressive actions yourself.
Oh.
And finding the ways to design that
Mhm.
is really hard. It's not just like attack enemy health bar goes down, right? You
Yeah.
have to figure out other ways to find a win condition, and so that's all a ton of custom scripting. It takes a very long time to implement a boss monster in this game.
I feel like some people are like, okay, we're tired. Let's get this. We're figure out an easy solution. But I think this is also important. Like when I hear that, one, it sounds difficult, but in my brain, like I think like that's hard mode. Like, can I do this without killing anything? At least intentionally. Like that sprite that turned to ash, I'm not gonna feel too bad about that. Like that's an accidental thing.
yeah.
But like that's
Just
that's the
returning it to its original
yeah. Yeah,
composition.
it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But like it makes me think of like this is a new form of boss mode. Most of the time we think of like it's the biggest, hardest bottle to slay, battle to slay. But in this case, really, if you can get through the whole storyline by always trying to look for more peaceful alternatives, like that seems like the harder standard to hold yourself to.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, reflecting back on it, because when I first started it, I was just trying to
Mhm.
discourage combat through resource management. And I found that you can't actually train a player who's been playing games for a decade or more
Yeah.
that, like, it's okay now, you don't have to kill everything. So it actually took a lot of iteration to figure out how to discourage people from just trying to
Yeah.
use all the resources, because they would get frustrated, right? When you're learned, like, okay, if things have health bars, they are bad and I should therefore kill them. You're like, no, 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 it's okay. If it's not attacking you, you don't need to attack it, right? So yeah, like that entire first boss fight, the Kraken, right? You
Yeah.
cannot attack the Kraken. And that is to set the tone for the player. Like,
Mhm.
hey, it's okay to not be able to attack something. There's still a solution. There's still probably a solution.
Yes, yes. I want to unpack that for a hot minute. I want to call it what Scrib said, though. Yeah, this is such a good lesson for real life, too, that the easiest way isn't always the best way, or like that default of like, here's how we always approach things. So I love how you're really opening the eyes of gamers in this. But I'm glad you pulled this up, right? Because myself as a gamer, I'm pretty dumb. Like, I admit it. Like you're like, here's two pathways, and I'm like, I only see one. Like that's how my brain sometimes is. So, unless there's a big giant arrow and there's also like a pathway that says go this way. Like there's some days where my brain's like, it's not connecting. So the idea of getting gamers to play the game and teaching them that there is a different way to play, that's hard. It's not just here, welcome to this world, come play in it. You have to do a lot of early instruction to say, here's how you're going to interact differently. So the Kraken encounter is a really brilliant example. Like it's at the very beginning, they're they're underpowered to be able to attack it. Like they can't pick up the weapon, too physically not strong enough to do that. But are there other barriers that you've created to help encourage players to say, I should try something else?
Yeah. Certainly, like some of them, like I said before, some ingredients you can only get off of creatures if you interact with them in
Hmm.
an alternative way.
Hmm.
And some of those ingredients you're told to go get. So you're given this hint, okay,
Oh,
I need to get this thing from this creature, but killing it is not giving me that thing. What do I do?
yeah.
And you get some hints to that, towards that, and it starts training you, like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
starts seeing things just a little differently. Like, how should I engage with this? And
Yes.
I really love like poems and rhymes. This is actually based a lot on fairy tale and folklore from around the world.
Yes.
And so I really lean into the feeling of listening to fairy tales and tropes. And one of the hints you get, for example, is though the turkey may have wings, it is scared of flying things. And you're like, okay, what does that
I
mean?
can figure that
How
out.
do I scare the turkey? What happens if I scare the turkey? And here's another one. This
Okay, yes.
guy's talking about like the bull's not going to leave him alone. It charges him every time. And she's like, well, maybe it's your red shirt. And now you're thinking, oh, red.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe something with red can
Hmm.
help me interact with this bull. So if we
Okay.
go around to the bull and see what he's up to, he's just hanging out there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But Granny said that some rats stole her papers, and maybe and they hid them in her nest. Maybe there's something in this nest here that
I love this.
we could get.
I love this. Like but it's clever, right? And it's playful, right? So sometimes we don't like instruction for like it's just instruction where it feels like school and it's like step one is this, step two is that, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
And that's a balance, right? You
yeah.
want to make sure that a player feels like they're getting hints, but not that they're being completely left out.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and that they get to experience that moment where like I do feel smart. Like when you were saying that, I'm sure there's some second graders, first graders that figured that out too. But my brain was like, I did get that. I understand what I need to do. I need to scare the turkey, which I'm glad you brought it up, turkeys, because I have a lifelong grudge against turkeys. So the idea of scaring them is wonderful to me.
Nice.
You got to pick a
Good.
fight with something in this world. So I've decided to choose turkeys. But that's part of it, right? Especially when games are meant to be fun, right? Like that's the first and foremost reason why we choose to play video games. It's not by like, I I really need to improve my hand-eye coordination, so I'm going to start playing video games so I improve that, right? Like we play it because it's meant to be something that's enjoyable for us. And so that cleverness, that opportunity that you give us to feel smart, to feel like we've unlocked a puzzle, to get rewarded for our cleverness, right? That is a good feeling that you're gifting us.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope that you get to feel like there's
Mhm.
that you're succeeding in some way other than just like being the best at being violent, right? Like it's
Yes.
like, like I solved that puzzle, or like this is a hint.
Mhm.
And that's sort of like Luna's approach to things as well. I mean, obviously you are playing as her, but
Mhm.
the storyline, the dialogue, how all that happens also helps encourage that.
Mhm.
And of course, you end up saving the world, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I think it's in a way that you might not quite first guess.
Ooh,
The
okay.
solution to those to
Hmm.
the problems of the world are again, it's a little alternative.
All right. All right. Fair. Fair. I like that though. I like that tease to say like there's the alternative because let's be honest, in this world we're craving original stories. Already we've heard enough people critique and say like, "All right, we're done with the Disney remakes. We've been there. Give us new stories at this point. We want something that's different." And in this case, it feels like that. It's not just the typical trope of each time you go to a level, you fight a slightly harder boss, and then you go through a series of other missions to get stronger till you're ready to fight the next level boss, right? Like, there's different approaches on what we're learning and how we're learning and the outcome that comes from that. Now, I want to challenge, see how you asked or handled this particular issue, because of course, there's the joy of it. We want it to be fun. But in games, especially video games, there's also that balance of wanting a little bit of struggle, right? That challenge that has to be there. Like if it were too easy, it's also not fulfilling. Like, okay, well, yeah, a kindergartner could do this, so I don't feel that smart for getting it, right? So how did you strike that balance to where there were challenges, but it was still welcoming for individuals? Like that appropriate level of difficulty that it wouldn't turn people away to be like, this is too hard. Like, this is Sudoku on extra hard level, and I can't do this.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is guessing, I guess,
Okay.
you making informed decisions. And then
Mhm.
a lot of it is playtesting. I mean, the most valuable feedback any game developer can ever have
Yeah.
is seeing how others interact with their game. And so I make sure that I'm doing that. I've demoed recently at the Seattle Indies Expo, and at other events before that. I'll be at Geek Girl Con again. And now that I have my demo out, every time a Twitch streamer is on, I'm usually sitting in their chat, like figuring out what's going on,
Yeah.
not spoiling it for them, but being there to see
Yeah.
how they're responding into it, even how their community is responding to it, so I can get a sense of what I need to tune and tweak, what needs a little more guidance, which needs less, etc.
Don't lie. You're a backseat gamer, aren't you?
Oh my gosh, I try not to be.
You're like
Actually a
nothing.
really horrible backseat driver. Like I am the worst backseat driver. I try to keep my hands off when it comes to gaming.
Okay.
I know better then.
That's fair. That's fair. Oh, in a car, that's different because you're actually there physically in the same space. Video game, at least you recognize, I'm not going to type anything. I'll keep my hands off the keyboard for now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
Well,
love
and
that.
you have to, right, to understand if people are actually getting it. If you spoil it for everyone, you'll never get to, and you ruin that moment of aha.
Hmm.
Like there's so many times I've watched someone struggle for a little bit, and that struggle makes the solution all that more satisfying. As you said, if it was just as match 3 the game, and you're just actually someone once mentioned, if you tried to perfect a video game by purely statistics, it would be a match 2 game, and you would just get rewarded for every move you made, and it would have not like little explosions and like, yay, maybe this is great. But in truth, that's not actually satisfying, right?
Mhm.
There's a level of challenge that's
Yeah.
required in order to feel good about playing.
Yes. Like there just needs to be enough of a taste of failure, just a little bit to say like, okay, this is something I want to overcome. Because there is that best feeling when you figure out a video game puzzle. You're like, I did it. And you've suddenly earned that crown instead of being like, well, this was an easy trinket that I picked up off the ground, sort of thing.
Yep.
I like the idea of you sitting there stealthily watching Twitch streamers play the game, and you've got like a notepad out and you're writing down like, okay, here's what's going on. Are there moments where you do get frustrated when they're playing the game and you're like, don't do it that way? I feel like I have had players who get frustrated with me that way when they watch me game. So I was just curious. Of course, because you know the
I guess
best way.
not. Yeah, I mean, I do know the best ways, but a lot of times the ways that they are trying to solve problems aren't necessarily wrong, they're just different. So for example, there's I'm not going to spoil it too much. There's a solution for one of the events in the game that you have to figure out how to overcome, and someone came up with a solution that was not quite as I expected. And it seemed valid to me, so I went and changed it and made that an alternative solution to the puzzle. So it's like, oh yeah, I mean, you were taught a different way, but it seems practical that this, using this wind potion to knock something over is just as good. So yeah, now if you use a wind potion, it also is a solution for that problem.
I love that. But again, I think that really hits home at the theme of your game is being creative with your solutions and you wanting to reward that. And that was something where they went above and beyond and found a solution that you and your team hadn't identified as one of the viable options, which I imagine in pure exhaustion that you had all sat down and tried to figure out like, well, they've got these kind of potions or they've got these kind of actions and how they can use it. And so to find one that somehow slipped through the cracks I'm glad to see, like, because I would think there'd be two easy responses. One's like, dang it, I missed it. But the other one, which seems so much healthier, and how your team responded was like, let's add that in. That's fantastic. That's exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Find more creative, strange ways that people wouldn't think of, right? Like that feels like an actual fulfillment of the mission.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's great getting to see those interactions and figure them out. And it's also great to see how people not only enjoy finding solutions in the game, but also enjoy learning from the game. So I think something I haven't really talked about is this game is based on real fairy tales and folklore. So you get to encounter all these characters, some of them from Western, fairy tales, but a lot of them from other places in the world. And you might not realize it at first, but suddenly when someone says, a hut on chicken legs like we're trying to find here,
Yes.
You're like, oh, I know what character that is. Like that is it's a Slavic folklore tale that's not as popular. Or when you run into Sun Wukong and help him on his journey to help the monk.
Yes.
You have a understanding of Journey to the West without being told this is Journey to the West. And it's really fun to see people engage, and it's really fun when people get to see characters in folklore that they grew up with that they're not used to seeing, and seeing them represented in a medium that they don't expect them in. So,
I love hearing the excitement in your voice. You're like, I love this. And then they encounter this particular fairy tale creature and this one. And like you really light up in this space. You have a heart for fairy tales, don't you? Like as a whole.
I do. I've always loved myths and mythology. I find it so interesting, and it comments so much on like the cultures that they're from, like their values, their fears. Will-o-wisps. Will-o-wisps are these magical light creatures that draw people to their deaths. But the reason that those exist is because gas in swamps tends to spontaneously combust and becomes lights. And if you follow the gas lights, you will go die in the swamp from the gases.
An
Like there's a
important lesson.
reason behind that myth. um, and like in other cultures, sleeping next to a burning fire in a low pit might actually put you at risk for carbon monoxide poisoning. And suddenly there's myths about spirits that stay around the campfire at night. And so it really allows you to get an interesting lens on not even just modern culture, but like sort of anthropological historical culture as well, and what these people were facing.
Mhm. Well, and I think that's
Sorry, I'm totally nerding out.
no, you should. Don't apologize. Do that. Keep doing that. But that's part of it is I like again, I'm continually seeing themes. Like you are who you are, so in and out, and I love that. Because it reminds me of like wanting to see more stories told, more perspectives from it. And the choice that you made to go beyond what we might consider more common Western fairy tales, right? The ones that we hear, and try to integrate in others in very unique and creative ways, and sometimes even refreshing ways. So, for some children out there, they were like, I've never heard it. Well, anybody, right? I've never heard of this. And for others, they're like, I've seen this before. And there's the excitement to see it come to life in this new way. Like, I love a few animes or mangas and webtoons. And so, like, when I see, like, oh, I know this kind of tale, I want to see how they flavor it and add it to this. Like, that's what you're doing. For many, like, you are telling a story that they've never heard before. And at the same time, for a different audience, you are retelling, you are integrating, and they get to experience it in your game. What is it like to approach those two very different types of audiences? Some who have never heard it before and others that are seeing you bring it to life in a new way.
Yeah, I mean, I think always my biggest concern is being respectful and true to the storytelling, the story I'm referencing. And I take some liberties with the situation so it can fit into the game, but I want to make sure that there's still the heart of it. So people who grew up with that as part of their culture feel like it's being respectful to the treatment, and trying to be both worldly and be respectful is important, but it's not easy to do, right? Like, okay, I have found this really cool fairy tale or folklore character.
Yeah.
Now you have to do extra research to make sure that you're actually treating it properly, that you're not just finding something on a single website and throwing it in the
Yeah.
game without ensuring that
This
that website's
blog has got to
correct.
be correct.
Yeah, exactly.
I watched this TikTok video. They seem to know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah. And that's it. Finding the proper information, the true information. It's not easy with anything,
Yeah.
myths or news or research, and being critical takes extra time. But I think it's worth it.
hmm hmm And already a complicated and a difficult game that you're already creating to say, like, let's also, I love this. I love that, like, this is an ambitious game. And I label that in pure praise because sometimes it'd be easier when we hear those all stacking up. Again, especially recognizing the challenge of being an indie game, right? Limited resources sometimes. And what we're compared to some of these larger titles that come with a lot more funding or a lot more teams and individuals on support. So the idea that where you decided to make sure that you invested in is impressive and admirable because
Oh, okay.
but it is like when I hear stories, right? Like these are the cultural stories are ones that, because they've been told so much, are ones that are held very dear to different cultures, and to see them come to life is exciting. Like even simple things. So like I'm a half Chinese, and whenever I talk about dragons, like it's always, everyone always pictures like the typical European dragon. Don't get me wrong, I love Sleeping Beauty. Maleficent's dragon is still one of my favorite designs too out there, right? But there are other forms and depictions, and it's not just the stories, but it's the way they look, how they're integrated, alignment of good and evil, and how they're framed and told, and how they interact with other tales, right? There is a lot of ethics behind that. So not just as a studio creator in this end, but for your own, what do you think it means to be an ethical storyteller? To take on this burden and this challenge ahead to make sure you do your research, but more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only so much that you can do on your own. Um, I'm actually now working with a group that actually engages with streamers and content creators from all over the world, uh, because they have nice mic and recording setups, and hires them to play video games and to give feedback on cultural aspects, on translation, on other things that it's sometimes hard to get that information on. And I think the extra effort, sort of ensuring that these things are considered and being informed by people who do have that as their culture is really important. And it's not easy. It's not something that you can do quickly. It's not something that you can do for free, but I think it's worth it. And I think we all have that responsibility, especially when we are, borrowing and showing respect to stories from other cultures, to put in those efforts and not just sort of grab it and run.
Yeah, this is ours now. Here we go. I'm gonna turn it into my own thing, which is hard
Yeah.
because there are some arguments people might say as being a recreative artist or how stories evolve. But especially when you're not coming from that culture, right? And you're trying to portray and integrate it and show it alongside a whole collection. Right? There's a little bit more of that burden to make sure that we are very thoughtful of the ways that we add our own selves into stories, because it's hard not to. And to a certain degree, like, we are adding our own excitement or a desire to say this is an important enough story that it deserves to be told. So there's small influences here. But how also do you think about how you influence or present these stories?
Um, I think about the themes of the story a lot. Um, I think the very first encounter with Sinbad is a good example of that. I mean, the themes of Sinbad voyages are misfortune that ultimately, through strategy and wit, works out for Sinbad. Now, Luna sort of steals his thunder in that situation. She's the one who has the strategic approach, but the theming of what happens on, the ship and with the Kraken is very true to how Sinbad's stories generally work, where there is this experience of a tragedy that is seemingly insurmountable and then requires a strategic approach to overcome that is not initially apparent, but then seems really, really smart once it's revealed.
You're like, ah, ta-da. But yeah, you're catching like what's important out of this character that we need to reveal. What's the real story or the moral that we're learning out of this? I love that. I love that a lot. So for you, when you came to this game, were there particular stories you're like, we need to make sure these stories are in the game? Like, I'm a ride or die with this one. It's in there or it's not, there's no game at all, sort of thing. Like, you've got to have a few hard ones.
So actually Journey to the West is one for me. It is, my mother actually got her master's in literature, and it was one of her favorite stories. And because it was one of her favorite stories, actually on this wall behind me, when I was a child, there was it's like 6 foot tall painting of the characters from Journey to the West that my mom had painted herself,
Oh, wow.
because it had meant so much to her. And that's one of the reasons that it inspired me to include that story. But even including it, I still learned things. Like, I originally had I'm going to totally slaughter the pronunciation of this. I'm sorry. It's spelled properly in game. Heng Song Zen, who's the monk. In the most common English translation, he is called Tripitaka. But Tripitaka is not a name that most people who are familiar with the Journey to the West story outside of like Western culture are familiar with.
Yes.
And so it required learning for me to understand that the names I had picked for those characters was informed by my experience with the story, but wasn't necessarily as true to the culture and the stories it should have been. So I renamed them to better match their original names in the original texts.
How exciting though. Like as you're going through and you're adding to the research, be like, there's more to this than what you had originally shared, right? Like, and you get to add to the experience. Did you ever go back to your mom and be like, look?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely have shared it with her,
Oh,
and it's great, and that's one of the nice things about the development of this game is, it's been a learning process for me too, not just learning about all of these fairy tales and folklore, but also learning about game development. I mean, I built my career while also building this game, and
yeah.
everything that I learned throughout my game development career helped inform the decisions that I have been making. So the game that I'm making now, if I made it all 100%, in the first 2 years of my career, it wouldn't be nearly as good of a game as it is now because I had so many learnings that I was able to bring into it. And it meant that I had to redo some things and reconsider some things, but overall, I think it's worth it, that investment and that time and sharing those learnings, both through the game and through my other work is important to me.
Yes. There's that balance. All right, we're gonna take a 10-minute, or not a 10-minute, a 5-minute break in a hot second. Before we do though, I want you to talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing in this game right now. Because first of all, I'm seeing an adorable gold cat that's been popping up, helping us and following us around, which is beautiful in every sense of the way. And Luna is in a very different foresty space than where we first began, of course, with the Kraken, or earlier on with the little village scene. So give us a sense of where we are in this demo.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just encountered Baba Yaga, who is sort of a force of nature of sorts. She isn't quite good, she isn't quite evil,
Mhm.
but she has offered to provide you with a magical flying broom as long as you complete some tasks for her. And so we're on a quest to complete those tasks, and it's to gather ingredients to make another broom. So we have 3 ingredients to get, and sort of like these 3 mini quests on this adventure. The first is actually related to the folklore around the Cold Food Festival in China. I don't know if you noticed that, but we helped deliver food from Chonger
Yeah.
to help with uh, paying his respects to his advisor who lost his life due to. Well, I don't
Yeah,
get
no,
to it, but
shh.
right, yeah, that was in there. Um, and now we're trying to get straw from this little impish man, who will only give us the straw if we can guess his name.
Who
So
could
I don't
that
know if you're
possibly be?
familiar with folklore around that. He really wanted our firstborn son, but we're like, no, we don't want gold. We just want straw. That seems a little too
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
Um, and that's it. Like you're
Lower the
you're
price a little.
engaging with these characters and trying to figure out the ways to help them. The first one was kind of an escort quest. This is more of an investigation.
Mhm.
And then the last one, we'll see. It's we have to get fairy dust. So we'll see how the fairies treat us as well. But it's a very story driven game.
Yes.
I've been talking so much about mechanics and a bit about the folklore, but there's a cat on my keyboard.
Ta. Of course
Yeah,
there
he's
is.
helping
Magical in
me.
every way as well.
Yes, yes, this is Calcifer. He is very magical, and he is the true stumbling cat.
I love that his eyes just
And
kind
he
of
likes being
glow.
held, so he's just like he's perfectly happy with this. He's getting attention, so he doesn't mind.
Oh.
Um, yeah, so throughout this game so far, we've learned how to make potions. We've crafted a few different potions. We've solved some of these puzzles, and right now we're trying to help out some people so we can get a few more ingredients and figure out the next thing that we need to do on our quest to become a potions master.
I love that. I love that. Move aside, Snape. Here we go. Luna's in now.
I don't know if you see it right here on screen is actually a joke.
Okay.
She's guessing,
Tom
is your
Riddle.
name
That's
Tom Riddle?
perfectly matched. I didn't see that. That's so funny. That is clever. But I think that's also even more fun, right? That we get modern humor in this. Like sometimes when we think of like fantasy, we only think like these are the ancient stories, right? Sort of thing. But to insert a small little Tom Riddle Harry Potter joke there, it feels it's clever. These are the tales that we're telling ourselves now, right? So to pull it all in brings them all to a similar level. That's clever. I like that. I was not expecting that at all.
Thank you. Yeah. I love honestly I really love the writing. So there's a lot of puns and references and other things here, and you don't have to catch them to enjoy the game, but it certainly has been cracking people up as they've been playing. It's really fun to watch.
I have noticed that gamers really love puns. They're suckers for them. For whatever reason, when they come across a pun, that is the best thing you could have offered them, better than any reward. It's our weakness. I don't know why.
Yep, exactly. And for example, the quest we just pick up to figure out the imp's name, it's called the last straw. So and you're getting straw as a reward. So
jeez. I feel like you need like a little drum set every now and then in the sound game too. Get it. I'm not so good with puns. A lot of them fly over my head. So a sound effect would be really helpful for me.
Okay. Every time a pun's on screen.
That's the sound. Okay. There's a pun somewhere here. I've got to pay attention.
It's like when you find a secret area. Da 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 da.
Yes. Give me the audio cues. Again, sometimes dense. No, I love this. When we come back, I want to talk more about your role on the business side, leading this team, creating it, the decisions you made, and having essentially a parallel career, right? Of both running the studio and also developing outside of it your work, your skills, your job titles in the game business space. Sound great?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Perfect. All right, everyone. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And in those 5 minutes, hop over to Steam. You can download the demo for Potions. It's free on Steam. Come check it out. You can play along with us, right? You're going to be a little behind, so that's good. So you can't cheat and just follow what Renee is doing. Come up with your own solutions. All right, but this will be a chance for you to come play along with us. It's free. We'll see you all in 5 minutes. Sound good, everyone? Hello, 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 friends. We are back. I know we're excited to hop back into this game and talking to Renee. So thank you all for joining us after our 5-minute break. Now, Renee, here we are back in this game. We are working on the strange request and the last straw at this point. Who is this that we have in front of us? Our little guest, our additional encounter.
Yeah, this is Near, and we actually sort of rescued her from the deep dark forest, and she's actually joined our town now. There's a number of NPCs that you recruit in your adventures by helping them, and then who will join the town and give you unique mini quests to get you additional ingredients or potion recipes. You can experiment to get potion recipes, but you can also learn some of them through the storyline itself. So you never have to experiment to beat the story. It just helps. And the NPCs help you find additional potion recipes as well. There's actually over 100 potions in the game. So it's a lot to discover. Yeah.
Okay, that is a lot of potions. I mean, granted, perhaps in inventory management, some people would look at that and be like, that's perfect. That is exactly what I want.
Yeah, and it allows you to customize to your play style too, right?
That's true. That's true. I guess what I was thinking, like, I have to manage 100 potions, but I read that wrong because it should be, I have the option of choosing from 100 different potions. I don't have to use all 100 all the time and have it on me, but because in my brain, I'm like, I can't manage like the 5 drinks that I have in my fridge. So I think I'm slowly revealing how little I can manage in my life these days. But I like that you give us the option. So in this game, we continue to get option after option, right? Like you have over 100 potions. We have so many different fairy tale and fantasy characters that we get to encounter. There's a variety of ways in which we get to engage in strategies that could be effective and different outcomes for the ways that we could engage in all of them. So all of this in my brain is like, this is adding up to a lot of storytelling elements. So you as the lead in all of this, right? Like here you are leading the studio, leading this story development. When you look at this, where do you begin to create organization and actually take all of these ideas and put them into action? Because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Like I've heard plenty of people like, oh, I've got this idea for a game. I've got this idea for this. All right, or they applied this. The challenge is taking the idea and all of these great things and being able to put them into action to make them come true. How did you find that first step to make it come true?
So I think that there are two components that are important. One is planning, and the other is prototyping. The hardest thing about games compared to other software development and other types of creations is just because you think something will be fun does not mean it's going to be fun. So you have to make it and try it. And if you decide too early what something's going to feel like or what something's going to do before really validating that,
Yeah.
you might just go in a wrong direction, make something that's not fun. Like an idea alone isn't enough proof that it's going to be good. And so a big part of that is, the iteration on ideas. But still there is that planning aspect. And the way that I designed the game was I designed all of the initial core mechanics that I wanted and the theming I wanted. And then I worked through all of the main story points that I wanted to have and expanded that with different fairy tales, flavoring them, helping add those characters. And then I could fill in the additional challenges, the puzzles you had to overcome, the things that you needed to create, the barriers that you either had to come back to later or figure out how to surpass in that moment. And it was going through that both planning and then iteration on the initial mechanics and then the implementation of those through the story that allowed it to stick in a way that makes sense. I think when most people play this game, it actually makes a lot of sense to them.
Yeah.
Sort of throw some of your initial conceptions around what an action RPG is, and it reteaches you, but it's very consistent in how things end up working, and so it makes sense in this world, and I think that's sort of the best outcome I could hope for.
Well, and that's always the challenge, right? There's enough that's different that feels refreshing, it adds something new, but also similar enough that we're like, I don't even know how to move forward, right? Like there's some classics that you're like, okay, this is how things need to stay the same.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
here's how we can move forward.
Inventory.
Yeah.
Inventory
Yeah.
works the same way as you'd expect.
Yes. We don't need to start brand new. Or, of course, as you mentioned, like that repetition. There's consistency throughout that. Once you figure out a sort of interaction format this way, it's something that can be repeated. It doesn't have to, but it can be repeated as an option. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I had actually just done, not mentioning it on screen, was I had found a patch of dirt that had a little bean sign next to it, and I clicked on it and got the hint. I bet this would grow with a little bit of care. And so when I threw a water potion at it, the magical bean sprout grew and allowed me to get to a second level where there was a chest with a collectible card and some ingredients. And now that I know that that's a thing,
Yeah.
there's a few of them in the game that then can get you into other secret areas that you might not have been able to access before. So as you discover these things in the potions that can help you with them,
Mm-hmm.
it allows you to look at all the levels that you have previously overcome in a new light.
Mm-hmm. And you're like, now I got to go back and look for beanstalk opportunities with my water potions. Like, here we go. Let's go revisit these spaces again. But that's also, I think, is really important. Like, you want people to go back and revisit these spaces. You've put a lot of work in this creation. For me, I look at games like I look at this is colorful. Even when you look at this space and I look at all the foliage around, when I look at the vibrant colors, right? Even the tree up there, right, where it has the purple branches, right? That's really beautiful. And I think the idea of like don't have people rush through these spaces to actually look and appreciate what has been created is important. So you're like, yeah, go back through it again. Go double check and find the stuff.
As I'm rushing through this.
Yeah, it's like, you've played this a few times though.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
I have seen it a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's all sorts of little things. Like in this situation, oh, the door shut in my face because I am learning about how these stalactites fall on these water drops. And so I have to be careful with my timing here so I don't cause it to shut the door in my face. Yeah, and I think that I've really had a lot of fun playing with adding these different characteristics to the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that allows variety to development process. I feel really fortunate that I'm not just doing one part of the development because, sometimes you're not in the mood to write dialogue lines. Sometimes it's really fun to do something else. And so being able to switch between designing puzzles, writing dialogue, implementing things in actual code,
Mm-hmm.
it adds a lot of variety that helps me keep engaged. Because after 9 years of development, like, that's a lot. That's a long time to stay engaged on a single project.
You're like, I'd like to do something different now, please. Thank you. Would you say that's one of the benefits of, being at an indie studio? Of course, you as CEO, it's not just being there, but having that opportunity to move between some of the different roles, to be able to play and wear all of those different hats, versus at some of the larger companies, it's like you are a writer and that's what you do. You are a developer and that is what you do. Do you think there's more movability, more flexibility being at that indie stage?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. But I think it is important for anyone. Even if you are a specialist working on a team as just an animator or, just a level designer, understanding how other disciplines work allows you to make considerations for their challenges and efforts and to be a little more accommodating in how you approach your own work. So, if you're a level designer who is familiar with the environment art process, you might be able to save some of your environment artists a little bit of trouble by designing the levels in a way that's considerate of the challenges that they're going to undertake when they are trying to fill in the level with the art. So I think that it's beneficial for everyone to
Sure.
be able to understand multiple disciplines. But certainly, as an indie developer, you're being pretty much forced to, right? Like you have to
You
engage with
yes.
it. And, even if I'm not doing the art in this project, there's one art piece in this entire,
Mhm.
game that's mine, and that's the soot sprite because it was simple enough that I could do it.
That's good to know. Every
Um,
time we're gonna see it, like, that's Renee's.
yeah,
Look
that's
at
the
her little
sprite, yeah,
baby.
that's fine. Yeah, the two-frame animation, is something I managed. But I still, engage with my animators. I'm help implement the audio keyframes on the animations because it is easiest for me to engage with
Yeah.
that. And I know their workflow because I have to be able to communicate with them and figure out what might help them complete the project more easily and their tasks more easily.
Mhm.
So you're definitely very, in the trenches with everyone as an indie, even if you're not doing everything yourself.
Mhm, mhm. I love that though, and I think it's such a good reminder that no matter what studio you're at, the value of knowing what everybody else is doing. Like you don't have to do it at the same skill level, but understanding their process, the challenges they have to face. One, it gives you more patience, right? And understanding their timeline. Be like, why don't they just have this done yet? But also
Yeah.
knowing how these puzzle pieces begin to fit together. I mean, this is of course a puzzle game, so maybe that mindset is more apparent on that end, but right, you're like, I love the example that you mentioned, like, oh, for level designers, right? Like if this is, or environmental, like if this is something they need, if I do this work, it'll make it so much easier for them. It'll help speed up the process, or it's one less thing they have to do. And it's starting to see that well-oiled machine that we like to pretend that all businesses are. Like they're all fluid. They know how to go from one thing to the other. But that comes from familiarity instead of being kind of sanctioned off in your own little space. Okay, that is an adorable. Is it? Oh my gosh,
It's a
it is a
tanuki.
Tinder.
So yeah, he had transformed into a kettle to get a free ride from a merchant and he fell asleep. So someone started trying to cook with him and he was stuck as a kettle over the fire. So we threw a water bomb on the fire, put it out, and now he's giving us a recipe as thanks.
Oh,
And he is also going to go to the town and be another quest giver that we can get quests from. So we've
another
we've
number of
recruited
questions.
him by saving him from his warm fate.
I love that. I love that. But sorry for interrupting because I saw that character's like, that's cute. I had to say something. Um,
No, yeah, no
but
problem at all.
right, you're absolutely spot on to say, right, to be aware of the full team. Now, of course, as CEO, right, you know all the roles because you've also brought everybody on that position. What has it been like to find the right people to work with?
It's been hard. I think the hardest part is being so indie that I can't hire people full time usually.
Hmm.
I do have a full time animator right now, but
Yeah.
it's only been since May, just for the end of the project here, because I literally just can't.
Yeah.
I can't afford as much help as I would like to get, and so I'm trying to figure out how to make the most of the assets that I am able to afford to be made and to keep engagement and motivation from team members. And honestly, over the last 9 years, there's been a lot of people who haven't been able to stay on the project because their day job becomes too demanding, or their work life balance changes and they need more time to take care of their families. And so it's been hard not having like a consistent full time team, right?
Yeah.
Because it's probably been done in like 3.5 years instead of 9 years. Um,
Fair.
but it does mean that those people get to bring in all their different perspectives. And it means that when they come into the project, they're seeing it for the first time with fresh eyes.
Hmm.
And most of the people that have joined the team are coming through recommendations of other people I've met in the industry. So I get to meet new people and sort of they're vetted from a certain
Sure.
standpoint because of connections within the industry. And that's why, it's recommended if you're trying to break into the games industry. It is so good and so important to make connections with people, because that's how a lot of those opportunities can come to you. It's just being able to to have someone who's like, hey, I know a person, right?
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Let me connect you. Hold on here. Let's have this
Yeah,
conversation.
exactly.
Right. But that's important, and you're right that it is very relational, right? It's your reputation is so important in the gaming space of people wanting to say, "Hey, I worked with this person, trust me, you want them on your project." Right? That's the conversation when you're like, "Okay, let's make this happen then," instead of looking at a resume or on a portfolio page and you're looking, I'm like, "Well, it looks good, but what kind of person are you?" Right? Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who can create. It's very different of having people who are really good on a team.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like to talk about when hiring team members
Hmm.
is I evaluate team members on just a few main points. First of all, is their willingness to learn and discover new things, like self drive, self learning, whatever you want to call it, being a self starter. I
Yeah.
know those are all really kitschy terms. But it is important to have someone who's willing to tackle problems that they don't know the answer to,
Hmm.
because it shows their willingness to grow. I would much rather have a new game designer who's still figuring things out than one that's like 100% convinced that they can only work with this certain Excel spreadsheet setup or these certain things,
Yeah.
because one is going to be, you know, open to learning new things
Yeah.
and discovering new things. The the other thing that's really important in regards to soft skills that I look for is someone who is able to not be a jerk. Honestly, it's
But
like
really, yes.
you can be the best developer in the freaking world, and if you are toxic, it's like it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It just ruins everybody else's experience. You could be the best programmer ever, but if you're going to make everybody else miserable, the game is not going to be good, even if it has the best, tightest code that imaginable. And so being able to find people who are willing to be collaborative, are willing to give critical feedback and accept critical feedback
Mm,
in a um, in a positive manner, right?
yeah.
Being able to not just say, "Well, that sucks," or like,
Hmm.
"I
Or
don't
shuts
like
down
that."
when they get feedback. You're like, "Mm."
Exactly, yeah. Because it's hard to work with, someone when you can't criticize anything because, as I said, games are an iterative process. So a lot of times there's iteration on how something's working. You need to figure out like, okay, this art asset didn't convey to the player what they need, or this puzzle design was confusing. So, we need to figure out how we're presenting it, or maybe we need to change the puzzle design itself. And it's a constant review of these aspects.
Hmm. I think that's important though. And I love your bluntness on this, right? Like, don't be a jerk. Be able to have conversations, be able to give, right? Because it feels so fundamental. And yet, those are the hangups that we do see time and time again that prevent people from succeeding in workplaces. It's not the lack of skill, right? As you mentioned, if there's a willingness to learn, right? We can probably move past that to a certain degree. But if you're just a plain butthead, you're like, I don't want you here. You're making this miserable.
Yeah, exactly. There's that saying, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses.
Hmm.
It's kind of the same. Like people don't like being around people that make them feel bad,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So you need to have people who support you and who
Hmm.
give you what you need to succeed. And oftentimes that's polite, constructive, critical feedback.
Yes.
And it's not easy to take critical feedback.
Hmm.
I think that that's a skill that I certainly had to learn myself. It's something where I was, you know, insecure, and that made me want to defend like my choices when really, if someone is willing to take the time to give you critical feedback that is constructive and that you can work off of, that is more valuable than almost anything else they could give you. And as you progress in your career, finding those people who are going to be your mentors, who are going to be the peers that you can lean on, is such a healthy support structure to have, because you learn to truly trust the feedback that they're giving you. And in times of like imposter syndrome, I have some friends who, if I am messing up, they'll absolutely tell me that I'm messing up. So if I ask them, "Hey, am I messing up?" and they say, "No, I think you did the right thing,"
Yeah.
I can actually trust them that that's not lip service, that they really and truly mean that they think I did the
Mhm.
right thing,
Mhm.
which can help in your darkest moments. Game dev isn't easy because it's so passion based, and it's so hard that a lot of times you're like, "Oh crap, nobody's understanding this puzzle. I suck at puzzle design. I'm
This
just
is
the
only in
worst
my
person.
brain.
And I feel bad." Right, right.
But that's such an important point, right? To have not just relationships, right, but good ones that you trust, that you know how to communicate, and you've built healthy relationships with. That's hard. And I'm glad you touch upon the imposter syndrome because it's popular. The amount of times we hear imposter syndrome on the stream is common, and it makes sense. We are individuals who are often told like aren't by default considered part of this space, right? Like by other individuals, it's easy to say like, should I be doing this? Especially when you're doing something so new. You're not just following in the footsteps. Like, all right, so you are a CEO of your very own studio. That is an intimidating process as you figure it out and you're trying out new steps. It's not as easy as following a checklist, like if you've done this and then you do this and then you do this, and it's a math equation and you always equal that. Like, it's not that simple. There's so many nuances to it. So having good sounding boards who you've welcomed that feedback is important. And both in identifying what you can improve on and what you've done well. Both of those are equally important, so that way you actually see where you are in this space, what you've done well and where you can improve. That's hard though.
Um,
Go for it. Yeah, let's steal the show. This
yeah,
is yours.
absolutely. I'm really glad that you touched on, the experience of being someone who identifies as a woman in the games industry, how we're not always considered welcome and included.
Mhm.
And sometimes where I feel like imposter syndrome comes from is really, really good positive actions of like making sure that there are women on panels and that there are scholarships for women who, my second grade teacher told me I didn't need to know more math when I finished my math for the year early. And right, like that could have ended my interest in stems right there when I was 8. Thankfully it didn't, but like there has to be some proactive action to uplift people who've had additional challenges. But sometimes those proactive steps can feel like can undermine your self-confidence, right? It's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, the only reason I was invited to speak on this panel is because they needed a woman."
Yeah.
Or, "The only reason I'm at this conference is because I got a diversity scholarship. Like, I don't actually deserve to be here."
It's
And that
performative.
has been a struggle. Yeah, right?
Mhm.
And that can be such a big struggle, trying to prove to yourself that just because I got a a leg up here doesn't mean that everything I've done isn't impressive or of value. And that's something that I have to remind myself, because I did get some diversity scholarships. I was able to attend conferences early in my career that I wouldn't have been able to afford to attend otherwise. And every time I had to force myself into a conversation, it made me feel even more like I wasn't supposed to be there at that conference. Um, and now I have a lot more confidence. Like I feel like I belong in these places,
Sure.
but I've been in the games industry for like a decade now. I should feel
Do you get a
comfortable
little pin
here.
at that point? Like, I've been here 10
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like my little goal, 10 years.
Yeah. Pair of socks. Congratulations. But it's an ongoing conversation that not only do we have with others, right? With introducing ourselves or choosing when we spend our social capital or where we invest in ourselves, but it's a very common internal conversation more than anything. And I love how you mention it because it's very relatable. Relatable to not only myself but to plenty of individuals in this space who don't fit that common stereotype that is often portrayed. Even though we see now like actual, hiring processes where it's we're seeing a lot more change up across the board in a variety of diverse ways, right? There's still at least that in many places that approach of this is what it looks like. Like even the fact that little girl was getting bullied for playing Minecraft, which of all
Right?
things.
That's like it's digital Legos.
Yes.
Like how
Yes. I don't understand. There's nothing inherently like just strictly masculine, especially if we go all simple and think masculine means boy only, right? You know, like it feels sad to hear stories like that, but we know it exists. And even if it's not always explicitly given to us, we are very aware of it. We always have to prepare ourselves for those conversations to be like, well, you're here because of this. And we see this in a variety. Like we just finished up some influencers, right? We had our developeHERs month. Now we're in developeHERs month. We're clever like that. But hearing, of course, women in this, like, oh, well, women have it easier as streamers and as content creators. And it's like, hold on here. But those arguments are told, and in our head, we always have to be prepared to answer them. We have to answer them for ourselves. So that way, when people ask us, we're prepared to answer them as well. And that is a constant defense that feels like we have to battle.
Absolutely. Definitely. Everyone has different challenges in their life. This is not to say that if you're not a woman, you don't get challenges in your life. It's just like they're different ones. And, historically and certainly in recent history, women have been discouraged from online gaming spheres, from gaming and a lot of like logic-based engagements, stems, etc. in general. And it just doesn't make sense. It's not like we are less able or less qualified or any of that. And so it's something that we have to overcome, and it requires proactive action to fight against the biases that had tried to keep us down. And I'm really glad that there are communities like the gamehers that show girls, women that there are people like them. And in terms of women streamers having it easier, or maybe women game developers getting easier access to events or panels.
Yes.
The way that I like to describe what it's like to be a woman in the games industry is it's sort of like picking your character in D&D, and you might get +2 to opening doors, but you get -2 to being taken seriously.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can get
out.
into yeah. Like it's just a slightly different play mode. It's not easy mode. They're all the same difficulty here.
Yeah.
It's just a different challenges that you get based on what your starting is.
I love that stat block explanation. Like this is just a different loadout, right? That we get here at this point. That is brilliant. I'm stealing that. But it's true, right? And prepping for that, isn't it right now? There's some conversations I've been picking up. I've been meaning to dive into it. The Grace Hopper convention, where it's often for women in the tech space to be able to network and to get interviews. And there was a real interesting conversation right now of the number of men who attended, even though it was about women in the tech space. Right. And being able to get interviews and have conversations. And there was a number of survey results that came back that said that by opening up and how the men participated this particular year is that they were interrupting, they were taking time slots, they were cutting and talking over individuals. I can see you like cringing.
That's not being an ally.
Yeah. It's like, that's not why you were supposed to be here. That's not how that's supposed to work. But that's the challenge, right? And why at this point we need spaces that allow us to get our point stats, right? To have an equal playing field in some levels. Now, for you in this space, right? And you have tackled this and you are thriving, right? You are a leader in this space. So people want to follow in your footsteps and what you've done and what you've created and are excited about how you're continuing to move forward. Like, I can't wait. Potions comes out in 2024. What month was it?
I have it announced very
Okay.
early 2024.
Early. We're ready. We're ready
Q1.
for it. Yes.
Q1.
Yes, yes. But we're excited for this. How have you been able to quiet some of those voices that are not helpful to your growth, whether they're internal or external?
Oh, geez. Um, that's a really good question. I think there's multiple things that I've done to quiet my internal self-doubt. Um, Certainly, like mental health is super important. So, growing up as a kid, I had a lot of really extreme depressive episodes. I've been diagnosed at least with situational depression, not full depression. I actually didn't go to see a psychologist at the time, and when I was a child. But for me, I know that I need to take care of myself both physically and mentally in order to be healthy. Like my mental health drops if I don't exercise or go outside. So it's actually really hard when I'm in like crunch mode, got to get a bunch of
Yes.
stuff done, because if I'm
Sitting and
not taking
working.
care of myself, I'll be, yeah, much harder on myself, much less effective.
Mhm.
And it requires like this added level of discipline and consideration of I need to treat myself as well as I would treat somebody on my team. There's no way I would ask somebody on my team to work 80 hours a week. And yet I still do it to myself sometimes. Like that's a
Renee.
terrible idea. No, don't do it. It's terrible. Never do it. Proper sleep, not being hard on yourself. If you're working till your brain is burnt out, then stop working. It's not like sitting there being frustrated at yourself is going to help you get that
Mhm.
work done. Go make a cup of tea, snuggle a cat. He's on my lap right now. That's all things that we can appreciate. Um, I also, so surprisingly, my mother actually identifies as a Buddhist. So I was raised with the concepts of Zen Buddhism. And the tenets of that are something that help me. And something that I do with my partner every morning is we actually read a Stoic passage, which helps us, ground ourselves for the day. And we discuss it and talk about whether we agree with it or disagree with aspects of it. And sort of one of the core tenets of Stoicism and Buddhism that I tend to appreciate is that the only thing that you are ever truly in control of is yourself. And, you know, don't let your emotions control your responses. You can feel emotions, you can be upset about something. But if you act out in being upset, then you are being controlled by someone causing you to be upset. And it's never beneficial. It's never beneficial. You should always like act within reason and the sake of like being good to others, like truly trying to let go of frustrations and be good to others and be good to yourself, because being harsh on yourself is not going to make it easier to get anything done. It's being patient and understanding but still disciplined, that helps.
That's so
And that's my TED talk on how I live my life.
I love it. I love this. I want more of this. But I think that's such a great approach because you start this with grounding yourself, right? Recognizing where you are, how you're approaching things. And it's easy to get caught up. Like when you talking about emotions and control, right? That's so important, especially when we're asking for feedback from others. And then there are plenty of others who also give feedback, even though we aren't asking for it, right? There's a variety on that end. And of course, we put our own challenges in front and recognizing how those challenges impact us and how we react to it. So I love it. My brain is breaking. It's not reflection because it's before. Um, you know what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. For
I
whatever
know what
you're preparing for the moment, and that's not the way I wanted to phrase it. But in that end, you're owning how you want to approach the situation, and I think that's important. So we recognize what we allow influence us. That's
Yeah, you're certainly setting yourself up for success.
yes, yes.
And it's worth that investment. It's worth that investment to be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's important. Be kind to yourself. Not work 80 hours, for example. Go outside a little bit, do a little more
Go
movement,
outside,
hold a
cuddle the
cat,
pets,
a very cuddly
all the
cat.
cats.
Yes, yes. But but it's remembering that we have those. And it's so easy when we're sitting down and we're like, we have all those deadlines, or we're seeing people come back and feedback, and we want to solve it right away. We want to get it done so that way it's not sitting on our shoulders. But by doing that, we push a lot of things back when we shouldn't have to on that end.
Absolutely.
Feel free, correct me at any point, because I'm this is me learning. I talk through things as I learned. So when I hear you, I'm like,
No,
this
no,
is what I'm
it's
hearing.
all good. Yeah, and I think for anyone who is looking to get started in the games industry, or really any like follow any vision or dream or passion, my recommendation is to set very small achievable goals that you can get done on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, whatever makes sense for you,
Mhm.
and then try to feel good about completing those. Like don't say like, well, I only said I'd read a chapter a day, and yeah, I'm reading a chapter a day, but that's not very much. It's like, no, you set that goal. Like, trust yourself that you set that goal, and feel free to learn and celebrate those accomplishments. I would say that my greatest passion is self-growth. And so
Mhm.
games is perfect for me because
Yeah.
there's so many disciplines and there's so much that you can learn, and it's
Yeah.
always evolving.
Mhm.
But having that like growth mindset is helpful no matter what you're doing, because even if you want to be a, a hairstylist, like, you still need to learn new things. Like, there's new products coming out, there's new techniques that are being discovered,
New
there's new
chemicals
trends
and how
that
they
you need to,
interact.
yeah, new chemicals, new trends.
Mhm.
And investing in that development of yourself is going to reap benefits, and even beyond just hair. Like, you need to learn how to do Instagram or TikTok to promote yourself. It allows you to uplift yourself by sort of taking things and going to the next level. And then what I think is important as well is giving back and sharing once you figure out these things, because not only does that help the next person, it also helps establish that knowledge in your own mind and cements you as somebody of knowledge and influence and consideration. So it's like, it's good for everyone.
Yeah.
Sharing knowledge helps others, helps yourself. There's like no reason you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really do like about the games industry, is for the most part the games industry tends to be one of the most knowledge sharing forward
Yeah.
industries that I'm familiar with, because
Mhm.
we're all learning all the time. And
Yeah.
just because someone shares their game design idea with you, it's very unlikely you can just steal it and run away. I
Yeah.
know, as when people first get into the games industry, they're like, well, I have the amazing idea and someone's gonna steal it. It's like, the hard part about games is not ideas. The hard
Yeah.
part about games is making games. Like, you're pretty safe to
Yeah.
share your ideas, as long as you're not like sending your entire code base to somebody you don't trust.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably going to be pretty set, but finding those like, oh, here's some quick little shortcuts that we've taken, or here's the program that we use, right? There's small but very important steps to keep people moving along and sharing that knowledge base so that way the overall gaming industry continues to grow.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm so glad that there's actually a lot of tools to help the next generation of game developers.
Mhm.
Uh I've touched Roblox like once,
Yeah.
but it's teaching so many kids about game development,
Yes.
right? Like, it gives
Oh.
them the tools, it gives them the motivation, it gives them the community.
Mhm.
Like, I imagine we're gonna have a ton of game developers. I know a few who are now,
Mhm.
adults and running their own studios, who started making Roblox games.
Yes.
And now it's important for us who have those communities and are cultivating them
Mhm.
to ensure that they stay inclusive and welcoming, so that people aren't being excluded, so everyone can share their stories.
Yes, yes. More people invited, more games being created. And again, like, I like that this is all weaving together very beautifully. Like, at the end of the day, we just want more games. It's not trying to remove anyone from the table. It's about putting more up there. We want every game. We want all those stories. We want all the developers. We want everybody to be able to be a part and tell their story, tell the stories that they've been thinking about, dreaming about all of this time. And I love that, right? That's ultimately what it is. Why we reach out, why we share, why we invite others, right? You've had so many people, right, that you've invited into your space I want to know who's been a really good mentor to you that you are like, I'm so glad this person was here. They helped encourage me on, because this isn't a solo space. You've mentioned how important it is to reach out to network, but who have been individuals who have reached out and helped you?
Oh my gosh, there are countless, truly.
Choose just
Um,
a few. You can't do all of them.
a a few. I would say that one of the individuals that stands out to me is somebody that I coincidentally met relatively early in my game development
Yeah.
career. And that's a name you might be familiar with, Rami Ismail. And he is an indie developer, has done, very small indie team development. He has also done a lot of things to uplift the games industry. He runs GameDev.World, which is a conference that is streamed live in like 9 different languages at once. He is trying so hard to help the games industry
Mhm.
develop everywhere in the world, and he spends a lot of his time going to places that are newer in the development of their games industry and their technology industries in general.
Mhm.
And his advice on how to approach a few different aspects of game development and team building and just how to uplift others had really informed my own career so that I can be more successful at giving back as well. So I've learned from a lot from him on both like the business side. He's great at as like business and understanding
Mhm.
those relationships, but also on like the altruistic side, like
Mhm.
how to support others as well. So
Mhm.
um,
Well, we love
we
to see
talk
both
regularly.
sides. Yeah. Right. Well,
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
important, right? In building this and having a mentor, somebody that you can actually access. Sure, it's great to have role models in the space that you can look up to and you can see some of their work just externally, like LinkedIn posts that they're putting out or podcasts. But there's something very important of making sure that you have open communication with people that you also admire and that are feeding back to you. They see you and want to invest in you. And you certainly have not
Absolutely.
wasted an ounce of that investment. I love everything you've been doing, and I hate that we're running so close on time because I'm like, I haven't asked half the questions in my brain that I wanted to ask. So I want to fit in a few more because there's so much more to you, Renee, than what we've been able to touch upon. So let's talk real quick about this parallel career that you've been running. Right? You've been doing so much on the indie side. Yes, you've been working with great people, you've had great mentors in the space, but you've also challenged yourself that on top of this wonderful game that you're walking us through right now, that this has been not always the main focus because you've had to develop in other areas and it's been advantageous. But what has also been this other half, right? Or whatever the appropriate split is, right? Of your space in the gaming world.
Yeah. So from a like purely career standpoint, I was trying to determine whether I wanted to pursue production, so like project management,
Mhm.
engineering, or game design. And I ended up feeling most comfortable with sort of a technical production route. And so a lot of my career was building up the skills of helping teams, particularly engineering teams, but also collaborating with other teams being successful. And that experience of helping other teams, other individuals be successful and be able to do and bring their best really inspired me. So I actually ended up going up a relatively a strong management route. And most recently, as the general manager of Phoenix Labs Vancouver, that studio was 155 people at the time I was the general manager, and my main mission was to ensure their success. And so it doesn't matter if your team is 5 contractors or 155 AAA developers,
Mhm.
you still have to think about the ways to support people, to give them structures that they can succeed in. Um, I know that occasionally people say, well, we care about people over processes. But my true belief is you make processes for people. Like if you're having processes for the sake of processes, those are completely useless
Throw them out.
processes. Like, no, it's awful. What you want to do is you want to make processes that support someone's success. if you have a good like task tracking system, it should answer questions for people and make it feel like a painless process. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be like this unnecessary overhead and homework that nobody references or that
We
they
all
just
hate
find
this.
to be a time sink. Yeah, exactly. um and really that comes with like all aspects. That comes with how HR is structured
Mm.
to support teams. That comes with holiday parties and like
Ooh.
celebrating people for the accomplishments. That comes with ensuring mentorship internally and externally for people in the organization so that they are getting the support they need to grow in the directions that they want. Yeah, they're all very important considerations. And
Yes.
yeah, so I guess my career is being a professional helper
Yeah.
of others. Definitely servant leadership is my style, I'd say.
Fair, fair. But I love the very holistic approach because sometimes when we think about, especially as a leader, reach in this space, we might think of how do you delegate tasks? How do you choose the right programs for project management to make sure everybody is informed and all the tasks are given out to the right people? How do you make sure communication channels are clear? And those are all very important things, but I like that you look at the overall, like, how do we create mentorships? How do we, the education process? How do we respect and celebrate people within our teams, right? Most people would think of like holiday parties as like fluff. Like, who cares what happens at those, right? Some people don't even like to attend theirs, maybe because it doesn't serve the good organizational purposes that it could provide on those ends. Maybe that's a chance to reflect on that. But you see opportunity in all of the different ways in which you can engage people. It's not as just one level on that end.
Yeah, exactly. And like not to get too much into the leadership side of thing, one of the main issues with like company events is a lot of times they're held outside of company hours.
Yeah.
And like that's unfair. Like if you have a family, like you are less able to attend those events and then you're not less able to connect with people and
Mm-hmm.
it can have a negative impact on your career even if the company is not intending that.
Yeah.
So you have to take the considerations into account of like people's situations so that you're ensuring that you're giving everyone things to be able to enjoy and succeed
Mm-hmm.
with. And like similarly, you don't want to have super like alcohol focused events because not everybody wants to just binge drink all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really like unhealthy environment and it can be uncomfortable for people who've had unfortunate experiences.
Yes, yes. It's that idea of already being inclusive and welcoming every step of the way. I think I read an example once where like they always did a camping trip and they're like, listen, not everybody can do extensive camping and wants to go out for a weekend with their boss, right? Out in the middle of the woods. Like, hold on here. You're talking about physical disabilities that might restrict that capability. Again, weekends for family or people just in general, of like, I've already given you 40 to 60 to 80 hours of my life and now you want me to give up my weekend right on this end.
Exactly.
And then sometimes there's the additional supplies, like if you're going camping you're like, you need camping gear or hiking boots, right? Or if you're going out and we're like, well, we're gonna host it at this bar, right? If you hopefully you drink, right? And you have something to do there, and if not, it's not fun. And also you have to buy your own drinks there. Like, we'll only provide some appetizers, so like now it's additional costs that come along with it, right? When you're trying to create doors, you're really throwing a lot of barriers in front of it that prevent people from enjoying it. Even if they do participate, they can't enjoy it fully.
Yeah,
I love this.
absolutely.
I love this. That's such a smart take. Now, especially on the indie side, like you and I loved your honesty on it. Like sometimes we can't pay people like to be full time, right? Then it would have been done 3 years ago. So we're on this. How do you continue to recognize and reward, right, individuals in the space when sometimes financial is not the option?
Yeah. So as an indie developer, there are multiple ways that you can provide support to people. I mean, uh, profit sharing and sharing of ownership of your company is
Mm-hmm.
is one way that's how a lot of indie development is structured because a group of friends get together and they're trying to create something together. So they're all sort of sharing the burden of not being paid to work on it. Um, there's also, you know, trying to provide people additional support and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly I've paid everyone up front, so I
Yeah.
thankfully I've been able to get into the financial situation and have the Kickstarter support
Mm-hmm.
where I was able to do that, but not everyone can, and so giving back to people by giving them opportunities that they might not normally be able to access, whether that is conference access,
Mm-hmm.
mentorship, um, helping them build their portfolio, providing them feedback there. I do a lot of mentorship when it comes to people who are early in their careers, not on my team. I mean, I mentor my team members, of course,
Yeah.
too, but not as compensation. But I think it's really important to give back to others by sharing the knowledge that you've acquired, and that's a really good way to make people feel valued. And certainly when it comes to my team members, if they say, "Hey, I have to, you know, work a few hours on this," or because of a new financial situation, I need to find a different job that's going to give me less time to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm always the first person to say, let me write you a letter of recommendation, let me review your resume, like, let's talk about how we can help you succeed, whether it's on this team or not on this team,
Mm-hmm.
because who else is going to uplift us if we don't uplift each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Continually to open doors, right? That's the idea. To support, to push forward. I love that. Right? That's again a sign of a good person, not just like a good employer, right? To say, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for where you're going in this place. And I want you to be able to continue to pursue that. That's important. I think that's a really beautiful
Absolutely.
note for us to end on. Though, again, I feel like I could ask for like 12 more hours of your time, but I don't want to because you are overworked as is, but you're an amazing individual. I'm so excited
Oh,
to see
thank
where
you.
Potions comes out. You don't have to think. You are an accomplished, brilliant individual. You've shared so many wonderful insights and you're welcoming more people into this space. And I can't thank you enough for that because seeing seeing how some doors are difficult, right? Like sometimes it's money, right? Being able to, or trying to switch careers. I've seen that, right? Like there's the challenge of saying like, you want to come from what? No, there's no relatability, right? Like hopping over is difficult, or being a minority in this space, right? There's challenges alongside that of creating indie games, right? Unique challenges. And you chose a pathway in which you stuck true to who you are and what you valued. And I love that. I think that is such an important story that others need to hear, right? It's inspiring, but it also reminds us that we should hold ourselves to that same standard. That's important, and that's what's going to make this game industry, the gaming space as a whole, so much better. So I love this. I'm so glad still that those parents told you about like their little girl and their story, because I know that's one of many stories that you've inspired. Those are one of many lives in which you have made a whole world become much more bigger because of that. So I want to thank you. I also want to give
Thank
one
you.
final platform for you. Anything else you want to say in this wrap up to our audience, to anyone who might watch this later on in the recording, who is just a gamer, right? And they're taking this in, they're learning about the space, they want to have an open mind. What's a final note you might leave us on?
Yeah. Um, I would say follow your dreams, follow your passions, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way. Um, I think that, you know, we can do it when we support each other. So, put yourself out there, ask somebody that you look up to in the space that you dream to be in. And I think you'll find them more helpful than you might fear. So do that.
I love that. I love that. It's such a reminder that we're not alone in this space.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And if you would like to help me with my dreams,
Yes.
please check out the Potions of Curious Tale demo. I would love your feedback, and if you wish list it on Steam or share it with your friends, that would mean the world to me, and it helps me get the message out so that hopefully this game can uplift and inspire others too.
Yes, yes, absolutely, Renee. Remember, everyone, right now the demo is free. This is your chance to go test it out. You know, give it a shot. See how clever you can be. Check out all of those puzzles. And for some of you that absolutely die over puns, this is your game, okay? Go see how many you can find on this end. But this is the important thing. We want to make sure that we're supporting others. When we see individuals who are pursuing their dreams, that are doing great work, that are telling stories that are not out there, we want to make sure that we're supporting it. So make sure you play the demo. Keep an eye out in Q1 for when the game comes out. We'll be super excited. Renee, on top of it all, where else can we find you? On social media so we can stay plugged in, stay in tune, or if there's Discords you want to shout out, give us the connection so that way we stay in touch with you, we stay in touch with Potions, so we can be excited and celebrate and enjoy all the good things that you're doing in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Renee Gittins usually finds me. I'm also Riku Cat, Rikukat, on everything. TikTok, Instagram, whatever you want, it's on there. And you can find a link to the Potions: A Curious Tale Discord on our Steam community page. So if you go to Potions: A Curious Tale, hit the community button, there's a nice big thing that says Potions: A Curious Tale Discord. So links in there.
I love it. It's giant. All right. That's easy for all of you to find. You're brilliant. I know you can search it. Think of this as your adventure for the week. All right. So find the Steam page, go to the community link, join the Discord. You're not going to regret it. I promise you this, everyone. This is the Caustic Phoenix promise. Let's go ahead and wrap up for today. Renee, thank you again for joining us, playing your delightful and ever amazing game for us. I'm so impressed that you got through all of this.
I did it. I actually wasn't expecting to. I think the average streamer takes 3.5 hours. Yeah. So I kind of speed ran it. Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. So for you speedrunners, now here's the time challenge for you all. See if you can hit that. I know I will be wandering around getting lost in these worlds. So I'm probably going to be more around the 5-hour mark.
That's the fun part.
Yes.
It's about like exploring, and as you're getting lost, you get to collect cool ingredients and make them into neat potions. So it's part of the fun itself.
Exactly, exactly. And we're looking forward to seeing your sprite artwork. So on top of it all.
Adorable sit sprite.
Exactly, exactly. No, thank you. To our wonderful community, thank you for joining us. If you're catching the recording, make sure you drop by on Monday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're always here. And this month, we are engaging with an amazing collection of developers in the gaming space. So I encourage you to come drop by. Renee, you are the perfect kickoff to this. You've set the bar so freaking high. Thank you again. And everyone, you all have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.